Welcome back, everybody. This is Paul again, making another one of my videos. And for those people who don't know, I've made a lot of videos about perception and about various kinds of discussions that are going on today. And I've been creating a series about how to use our own mind and our own attention to basically expand and enhance our perception. And I want to preface that a little bit because I particularly practice some techniques that were taught to me long ago in the early 70s by a man named Prem Wawat, and I am not here to discuss those techniques. I strongly recommend them. But I read a lot of books along the way, and my own practice and investigation of my own awareness has given me a lot of really fascinating experiences. And a lot of these techniques have been written about. There's many different kinds of techniques for using our awareness. And this particular book, The Light of the Soul, the Sutras of Patanjali, is just one very famous book. This is a modern commentary by a teacher in Tibet in the early part of this last century. And those techniques that Patanjali wrote are extremely powerful, and I think it combines down to in like say 108 lines, or it's a small number. I don't remember the number right now. And supposedly he was, he said, well, if I'd had more time, I would have made it shorter. I would have edited it down, because ultimately what we really need is we need very simple techniques to manage our own awareness. And there are many techniques, but we have to actually do the simplest thing, is actually put techniques into process and actually use them. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, one of the main problems is that we have to learn how to just calm ourselves and to be aware of that inner presence and just let everything settle. Take some practice, and then we also have to not react to what we perceive, because if our perception is developed where it becomes a little bit more subtle, a little more subtle, a little more subtle, we might experience things that are really open up our whole perception about life and start challenging some of the concepts that we've been living with. And maybe even shake us into an understanding that, look, every single minute of our life is precious, because we can have an extended awareness. It's a kind of fulfillment. Now, a lot of people these days, it's very popular to talk about things like psychic powers, and do you see the aura, and are you clairaudient, or you do this or that. Now, I've personally experienced a lot of interesting things, and a lot of people have, and from my point of view, it's just like all so-called normal perception that we have, what is actually so-called normal about the fact that we have eyes and ears, and just the normal senses, so-called normal senses, are miracles in themselves. We don't quite get that sometimes. We want to have like some superpower. You have a superpower. You can see with eyes. You can taste amazing things and so on. So we already have incredible senses and technology built in, and part of the refining of the body is just enabling just the normal, the eyes, the ears, everything, just to start tuning into just more subtlety. It's just like two people looking at the same scene. Maybe one person notices certain subtleties or certain things or certain movements or whatever. And depending on our perception, our body, and so on, each of us sees in a little bit slightly different, unique way. And it's important really to allow ourselves to have our own personal experience and not try to compare. Well, did you see that thing? Or are you able to see ghosts? Or so on. It's just kind of silly in a way. Because ultimately we don't want to borrow our perception from somebody else. We want to have our own experience, the gift that it is, whatever it is. It may be subtle. Some people have an ability to do some phenomenal things. They just, when they hear a sound, they might smell something, or when they see a color, they might hear something, or something like that. So those kinds of unusual perceptions are really built into the human body, but depending on the person's makeup and openness and so on, it's just a matter of, like, some people's eyes are just a little bit better than others and so on. So the ears, same way. Now, one of the things that I would want to bring up is this subject of sound. For a very, very, very long time, sound has been used to tune in the mind and the body. And sound is a very fundamental force in nature. It's just, there are sounds going on continuously. Sound is like energy waves that are going through materials. It could be a very subtle material. It could be through the air. It could go through rock. It could go through quartz. But sound is fundamental in our bodies as well. And sound happens to propagate quite well in water. And our body is made of a lot of water. So the use of sound, harmonic sound, can help tune our physical body. Again, it's made of water, a lot of it. Water and electricity. So if we can get some rhythm and harmonics going on in the water in our body, and then sound travels well through bones. When we speak, there's a resonance in their bones, in the cheeks, in the ears, in the skull. There's a cavity. When we make tones to ourselves and make fundamental sounds like the Om, all of those simple techniques are among the techniques that help us focus. Now, sound is nothing without silence. Sound, even the subtlest sound, is in reference to the ground plane of silence. Deep, deep, deep silence. Now, if you take cold, cold, cold outer space, it becomes so cold that it's like absolute zero, they say, almost an absolute zero, but there's supposedly some quantum, some kind of movement even in the almost absolute zero. So sound is in reference to the deep inner quiet. Now, how are we going to get that quiet? We can get sounds outside, but where are we going to get quiet? Quiet is something that we can get inside. You can turn off all the outside sounds, and then you're going to hear the subtle sounds that are going on. You might even hear some mice or some crickets or something. But inside there's a very, very deep and profound silence. And within that silence, we start to hear the sounds of our own being, our own, the blood, everything, the way everything is moving in our system. So I encourage people to experiment. There's many different teachers out there who talk about the use of sound. But it's still used. The Amen, the Om, the fundamental sounds of Aum is well known and well discussed. But all those things now, within us, there's also a deep sound and a deep silence. Now, in order to do that, we need to go with someone who's a teacher. I'm not one who teaches these techniques, but to turn how to turn our own awareness within. Now, the mind is very restless, as we've discussed before. The mind is actually trying to find something beautiful to stick to, because ultimately there's a thirst within us that longs and longs and longs to reach an equilibrium. It's sort of like a drop wants to be merged with the water. We want to experience the peace of a non-duality state. We have the physical body, there's a lot of duality, but in our awareness we want to reach a place that's non-dual, that doesn't have any conflicts. And there is such a place. But it's kind of like polishing that lens, just slowly, just get rid of the obstacles. It's just really, really simple. You can put something in front of your face, something really small, and you can't see anything. So the obstacles to our unlimited and expanded perception that should go on the rest of our lives, they're really not that big, really. It's most of it what we put there, and there's a lot of discussion that people have these days about helping the body get refined. Again, clean water, clean food, so everything is smoothly running. So I encourage people to look into the subject of sound and how it affects materials and so on. It's extremely fascinating. And how you can use the application of the, just try to listen to the silence. Try to be quiet. There's an old fable from a Buddhist teaching to go listen to the rock. And if the rock, you sit there and listen and you don't hear anything, eventually you start hearing subtler and subtler things, and you realize that even the rock is expanding in the sun and it's making some slight movements, and you start feeling the presence all around you. Because if you can tune to something subtle, just try subtler and subtler perceptions and not reacting. Because again, babies can, and young children can learn extremely quickly because they don't have that barrier of all the concepts. They perceive things and they have a flow, a non-dual flow of perception. Because ideally, what the kind of perception we want is not when we see something, we analyze it, we touch it, or we cut it up, or whatever. We want to have a tremendous clarity about our perception, so when we see things in our life, everything, we understand the subtle parts of it. We understand the purpose for it, the function of it in our world, by direct perception. So as we still our mind and get tuned in and using different techniques, including sound and silence, we can, the door really can be just flown right open. Honestly, there's a certain point where the veil just can drop, and all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, it's just that easy to just let yourself go into a really, really beautiful, smooth resonance. So again, I have the YouTube limit here, and I have to make this short and cut it short, but tune into my other videos. I appreciate the good feedback. And again, thanks for listening.